Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Post, publisher of more than 1,000 comic books and marketing expert, covering woke teachers in a panic as new laws are preventing them from teaching divisive concepts in school to kindergartners through 12th grade. This is not yet in every state, but it is in 7 states, and it's all thanks to an executive order Trump put in while he was in office. Let's get into the story. Before we do, please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up. I really appreciate you guys. This headline kind of says it all. The anti-woke legislation making K-12 teachers in New Hampshire nervous. But it's not just New Hampshire, it's in multiple states. None of this used to be necessary years ago because we could trust teachers were not trying to push things on students that were ideologies instead of facts. But things have really changed in the last few years. From the New Hampshire Bulletin, teachers, public school advocates push for repeal of divisive concepts law. You know, the teachers unions absolutely hate this because they have a serious agenda to push. Here's the history of this from the Free Speech Center on divisive concepts. Divisive concepts legislation emerged in multiple states beginning in 2021, largely fueled by conservative legislatures seeking to limit topics that can be explored in public school classrooms. The laws have been driven in large part by opposition to critical race theory, an academic theory that says racism in America has largely been perpetrated by the nation's institutions. This is trying to push collective guilt so that you could tell children of a certain skin color, you're victims, and other children of other skin colors that they're oppressors, as if these children had anything to do with any interpretation of history whatsoever. Laws are limiting discussion of race in public schools. In the political realm, critical race theory was recast as an effort to make white Americans uncomfortable with America's history of racial justice and slavery. A number of conservative legislatures introduced legislation that would limit the discussion of race in public school classrooms, inhibiting the academic freedom of teachers to protect students. The Association of Research Libraries traces the origin of these laws to a 2020 executive order issued by President Trump. The order, titled "Combating Race and Sex Stereotyping," includes this justification. Many people are pushing a different vision of America that is grounded in hierarchies based on collective social and political identities rather than the inherent and equal dignity of every person as an individual. This ideology is rooted in the pernicious and false belief that America is an irredeemably racist and sexist country, that some people simply on account of their race or sex are oppressors, and that racial and sexual identities are more important than our common status as human beings and Americans. Executive Order 13950 required federal agencies to assess compliance with the order's mandates in any diversity, equity, or inclusion training. The order described divisive concepts in this manner. Divisive concepts means the concepts that one race or sex is inherently superior to another race or sex. The United States is fundamentally racist or sexist. An individual, by virtue of his or her race or sex, is inherently racist, sexist, or oppressive, whether consciously or unconsciously. An individual should be discriminated against or receive adverse treatment solely or partly because of his or her race of sex. Members of one race or sex cannot and should not attempt to treat others without respect to race or sex. An individual's moral character is necessarily determined by his or her race or sex. An individual should feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, or any other form of psychological distress on account of his or her race or sex, or meritocracy or traits such as hard work ethic are racist or sexist or were created by a particular race to oppress another race. Biden repealed the executive order on the first day of his presidency, but much of the language of the order has been incorporated into state legislation applying to public schools. For example, in March 2022, Georgia passed a law banning the teaching of divisive concepts, and Florida passed the Stop Woke Act, prohibiting teachers from presenting certain viewpoints on race. In May 2021, Tennessee barred educators in public schools from teaching about critical race theory. So far, there are 7 states that passed laws to restrict discussion of race, gender identity, or sexual orientation in public schools in 2022. Since the beginning of 2022, at least 8 laws were passed restricting what teachers can say about race, gender, and sexuality, American history, or inequality in K-12 schools and in some colleges and universities. So this is something that teachers Not all of them, but teachers that want to push the woke agenda are very unhappy about because their hands are really tied. If they say the wrong thing, they can get civil fines against them or potentially lose their teaching credentials. And of course, what's most important to them is not pushing the agenda. The most important thing is that they're going to be able to keep their job, get that pension. But a close second to that is pushing the woke agenda. This isn't all teachers, but you would think that teachers would understand that basically and inherently, you need to respect that your point of view ideologically should not be forced on children. Unfortunately, now we need laws to protect children and parents from this. Now, naturally, you'd want to be able to include these kinds of things where teachers wouldn't necessarily present these ideas, but if students are going to research these ideas and create essays and do research and they want to present concepts for the teacher to review, that should be fine. That shouldn't be a problem. The problem is using that as a loophole to tell all children that they can get their hands on right from wrong, ideology, things that come from a family and a community, not from one single teacher. So as a result, students are trying to do their homework, they're trying to do some projects, and some projects get damaged. And other concepts like what happened to the Jews in World War II are even difficult to be discussed. At least teachers claim that, because technically that kind of a concept falls within these laws. Persuasive research papers are a yearly assignment in David Scannell's English classes, and grading them is part of the job. But last school year, the Milford High School teacher faced a new challenge. The New Hampshire legislature had passed a law in 2021 barring public school teachers from advocating for certain positions around race, gender, and other protected classes. Now, Scannell was unclear how to handle some of his students' assignments. Yeah, well, don't advocate for positions that are political in classrooms with children. Children can be very easily persuaded. They don't have an extensive worldview. You don't know what the values are and the beliefs are of the family that they come from. And you don't need to put children in conflict with their family's views and the views of that local school teacher. One had asked to write an essay arguing in favor of affirmative action, but the new law appeared to prevent teachers from advocating for affirmative action. Well, of course, teachers shouldn't be advocating for or against affirmative action. Just discuss your Constitution. Kids need to know how the government works. They need to know the history, straight facts of what history are, and they need to know their constitutional rights. And the constitutional rights that students have are very clear about affirmative action. Another student requested to write a paper on the merits of American exceptionalism. Under the divisive concepts law, is a teacher grading such a paper required to fail the student if he determines there isn't any merit to American exceptionalism? Scannell asked. No, tell them not to write papers that violate the law as we're dealing on the defensive as we've been under attack by cultural Marxism. Unfortunately, these laws shouldn't be necessary. What makes it inconvenient for the teacher and what makes it inconvenient for the students that causes students to lose opportunity to help figure out and form their ideas is because of this assault on the American culture. Collective guilt? How ridiculous of a concept is that for an individualist American culture? If you sign on to these ideas, collective guilt, what they want to try to push with critical race theory, you can forget the U.S. Constitution. It becomes weakened and it eventually becomes eliminated. You have to buy into collective opportunities and collective identities instead of individual identities. Just give up property rights while you're at it too, because that always comes with communism. In the end, Scannell approved the topics, but he said the dilemma is representative of what many teachers have wrestled with since the passage of the law. Over a multi-hour hearing Thursday, educators and public school advocates gathered in Representatives Hall to argue the 2021 law is overly vague and punitive and to advocate for a bill from Democrats to repeal the law. Opponents of the law said it had caused teachers to avoid addressing certain topics or subject matter for fear of receiving parent or student complaints. Yes, they should be afraid of parent and student complaints. The teacher's right of free speech is different from their responsibility to teach the students and respect the parents. Just being decent is not enough anymore. You need a law to control teachers pushing ideology. It's ridiculous. Supporters of the law, who included Republicans and some members of the public, said the teachers' concerns were overblown. Quote, the testimonies we heard today are pure myths and scare tactics, said House Majority Leader Jason Osborne. The current law does nothing to prohibit the teaching of racism and its effects throughout history. The Democrats' bill, House Bill 61, would repeal all the statutory language added by the legislature in 2021, and it would add new language stipulating that teachers will not face civil liability for instruction around, quote, the historical or current experiences of any group that is protected from discrimination under the existing state law. Quote, teachers just want to teach, as we always have, without the interference of the state, without the fear of an inquisition or the loss of our credentials. That's what it's really about, losing credentials and losing pension. Said Petrigno, a retired social studies teacher, all because maybe a student misinterpreted the class discussion. Wow, is that disingenuous? Because a student misinterpreted the class discussion. These laws are really necessary. New Hampshire's new teaching restrictions, known to opponents as the divisive concepts law, prevent 4 separate types of instruction. School staff and public employees may not advocate that a person of one race, gender identity, sexual orientation, or other protected class is inherently superior to another. That should not be that big of a restriction to say that one race is not superior to another race. Incredible that it is. They may not teach that one group is inherently oppressive or prejudiced against another. Of course they're not. They may not argue for different treatments based on a person's protected characteristics. And they may not argue that people can't treat people of different characteristics equally. Those teachers who do can face civil claims in Superior Court and procedures before the state's Human Rights Commission and can potentially have their credentials revoked. Republicans and supporters of the law have argued it's intended to prevent students and public employees from feeling singled out for their race and labeled as inherently oppressive or inferior to others. It is necessary. It's incredible that this is necessary. I'm glad to see there are laws protecting this, in some states at least, but it really is disturbing to see that it's necessary. It tells you there is something deeply wrong in the United States with people pushing this evil agenda. And on children, Democrats and opponents say the prohibitions are vaguely worded but carry harsh potential professional consequences if teachers violate them, creating uncertainty for them in the classroom. I think the certainty is go back to what you did before the last 10 years or so and stop it with trying to push progressive agendas on children. If children bring up a topic in class and it's inappropriate for class, let them know it's inappropriate for class. If they want to write an essay based on it, of course you're allowed to grade that essay in context with them making any kind of argument. You don't have to agree with the argument they're making. It can be a legitimate argument. It can be an argument that you don't consider appropriate. If they formulated it properly and they have good citations with whatever work they hand in, you grade based on that. They are really unhappy to be forced into actually conducting an appropriate classroom focused on learning, teaching, and getting students to think for themselves. And that is the scariest thing to these teachers. God forbid the students should think for themselves. Rachel Blanchett, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and Justice Coordinator at Oyster River Cooperative School District in Durham, said the law had demoralized teachers in her district, particularly those teaching humanities subjects. Quote, this not only hurts our teachers and students, but also the state at large, she said. We should want our teachers not to live in fear of doing their jobs and doing their job effectively incorrectly, especially in light of a teacher shortage. Whether there's a teacher shortage or not, this is not a law that a state puts in place because they're concerned about recruiting teachers. They could have a massive shortage of teachers. They don't want teachers that are abusing their students with ideological poison and agendas. Others said the passage of the law had emboldened some people to engage in racial attacks. Such as what? That sounds serious. Perigno, the Democrat sponsoring the repeal bill, read from an email he had received from a person calling his effort anti-white. So you criticize someone because you're targeting a certain race, and that Democrat politician who says, hey, you seem like you're being against my race, that is considered to be a racial attack? There will no doubt be challenges to these laws in different states. Different state Supreme Courts will make a decision on whether or not they want the laws to go forward, or who knows, maybe they get challenged by appellate courts or they get challenged even at the Supreme Court level. It does seem like it's unreasonable to have to even have these laws in the first place. But when you have students literally kindergarten through 12th grade, who are trying to learn from their teachers, who are trying to make their way in the world, understand basic concepts, understand language, understand critical thinking. They should not be exposed to progressive political Democrat agendas. They should know what their rights are because of the Constitution of the United States. If you want to cover amendments to the Constitution, that's wonderful too. You can cover amendments. You can cover how the three branches of government works. You can cover civics. You can cover history, math, reading, literature. There's all kinds of things you can learn in school. What you should not learn in school is whatever the latest new trend is in Democrat politics that they're trying to push. It's really unfair to students. It's very difficult for me to believe that this is even a real thing, but it is a real thing. And I can see why woke teachers are in a panic, because there's a lot of pushback on this from state legislatures, from parents, and even from students that know it's wrong. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. Do you think it's a good thing that we have some divisive concepts laws, at least in a few states, protecting children from teachers pushing their ideologies and their agendas on the students? Or do you think maybe teachers, no matter how political they are, if they're a communist or a capitalist or whatever they might be, should they be pushing their own personal ideas on students? Or should they just be teaching students what they need to know in any given subject? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another video. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.